Welcome to HOA Catastrophe. The board picked the wrong week to play games. I will not be questioned. That is what Linda yelled, standing at the curb with her clipboard raised like a stop sign, while my fence contractor idled his truck behind her. She told me she would call the city inspector to scare me, even if the city had nothing to do with it. I am a warehouse forklift lead in Montreal who cannot miss overtime, and I had exactly one Saturday to get this fence started before my shift rotation locked me into nights for 3 weeks straight. Linda Sanchez, pool and amenities chair for Prairie Crossing Community Association, controlled pool access like a bouncer and treated property lines like her personal fiefdom. The fence I wanted to build was a simple 6-foot cedar privacy fence along my back property line, replacing the sagging chain link that came with the house. I had filed my application with the HOA 2 months earlier. I had my permit from the city. I had my survey. I had my contractor. What I did not have was Linda's blessing, and she made it clear that mattered more than any of those other things. She stepped in front of the truck as my contractor, a guy named Mark, tried to pull into my driveway. "I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes," Linda said, waving a stack of printed photos with no readable text. Mark looked at me. I looked at Linda. She tapped her clipboard. "You do not get an opinion. You get a fine schedule," she said. That was her line. She used it on everyone. I had heard her say it at the pool when someone asked why guest passes cost $20. I had heard her say it in the parking lot when someone questioned the new no-truck rule. Now she was saying it to me, and I realized she meant it as a threat every single time. I walked over. "Linda, the city approved the permit. The HOA approved my application. The survey is done. Mark needs to unload." She cut me off. "The survey is wrong. Your setback is 3 feet from the property line, not 2. You are building in the easement." I pulled out my phone and showed her the approval email from the HOA management company. She did not look at it. "That was provisional," she said. "We are allowed to revoke it if new information comes to light." "What new information?" I asked. She smiled. "A complaint. I filed one this morning. Now we have to hold a hearing before you proceed." Mark got out of the truck. He was a solid guy, probably 50, with 30 years of fence experience and zero patience for nonsense. "Lady, I have 4 jobs this week. If we do not start today, he is pushed to next month." Linda turned to him. "Then he will wait. You do not get an opinion. You get a fine schedule." Mark laughed. "I do not live here." Linda did not blink. "Your truck is parked in violation of the guest vehicle policy. You have 15 minutes to move it, or I call the tow company." Mark looked at me. I shook my head. She is serious. I tried reason. "Linda, the easement is on the other side of my property line. I have the plat. The survey company confirmed it." She pulled out a pair of work gloves from her jacket pocket and slapped them on the hood of Mark's truck. "You clearly do not understand property law. The easement runs along the rear boundary, and your fence will block HOA maintenance access." "What maintenance?" I asked. She did not answer. She pulled out her portable thermal printer, the kind you use for receipts, and printed a violation notice on the spot. She handed it to me. The header said "Violation observed," and the date was today. The description said "Unpermitted construction in progress." I had not started construction. Mark had not unloaded a single post. Linda told Mark to leave. Mark asked me what I wanted to do. I told him to go. I would call him when this cleared up. He shook his head and drove off. Linda watched him go, then turned to me. "You will receive a formal hearing notice within 72 hours. Until then, no construction. No posts, no digging, no contractors. If I see activity, the fine is $500 per day." She walked away. I stood there holding the thermal printed violation and the work gloves she had left on my driveway. I picked them up. They were new, still had the tag tucked inside. She had brought them specifically for this moment. I went inside and pulled up the HOA bylaws. There was no provision for revoking an approved application without a board vote. There was no requirement for a hearing on a survey dispute, unless the dispute involved common property. The easement Linda mentioned was not on my plat. I called the survey company. They confirmed the rear boundary was clear. The only easement on my property was a utility easement along the front, and it was nowhere near where I planned to build. I emailed the surveyor and asked for a written confirmation. He sent it within an hour. I forwarded it to the HOA management company with a request to expedite the hearing and resolve the complaint. The management company replied 2 days later. They said Linda had submitted a complaint alleging I damaged common property during a site inspection. The complaint claimed I had removed survey stakes and disturbed HOA landscaping along the rear boundary. None of that was true. I had not touched anything. The survey company had placed stakes and flagged the line, but those stakes were still there. I went outside and took photos of every stake, every flag, every inch of the rear boundary. I also noticed something new. Someone had placed orange cones along the property line, about 2 feet inside where my fence was supposed to go. The cones were HOA branded, the kind they used for pool maintenance. I took photos of those too. If you are enjoying this chaos, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is about to get even wilder. The hearing notice arrived on Thursday. It was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 7 in the evening in the Prairie Crossing Community Association clubhouse. The notice listed Linda as the complainant and hearing chair. That was a problem. Linda was not supposed to chair a hearing where she was the complainant. I called the management company and pointed that out. They said Linda had volunteered to chair because the president was out of town. I said that was a conflict of interest. They said they would note my objection. I started building my case. I printed the survey report, the city permit, the HOA approval email, the plat, the photos of the stakes and cones, and the timeline of every interaction with Linda. I also printed the violation notice she had given me, still smelling faintly of thermal printer ink. I put it all in a binder with tabs. I labeled the tabs. I made copies. Then I called my ally, a guy named Terrence, who managed an HOA in the next neighborhood over. Terrence and I had met at a community meeting 6 months earlier when Prairie Crossing tried to coordinate snow removal with his association. He knew HOA law. He knew bylaws. He had seen Linda operate before, and he did not like her. Terrence came over on Sunday. I showed him the binder. He flipped through it and nodded. "You have everything you need," he said, "but she is going to try to control the meeting. Do not let her cut you off. Record everything." I asked if that was legal. He said yes, as long as I announced I was recording at the start. He also told me to bring a witness. "I do not have a witness," I said. "She blocked Mark at the curb. No one else saw it." Terrence thought for a moment. "What about the mail carrier?" I blinked. "What?" He pointed at the street. "Your mail carrier. If Mark was here on Saturday morning, your mail carrier probably tried to get around his truck and those tools and posts near the curb. Carriers notice everything. Go to the post office and ask." I went to the post office on Monday. I asked if anyone remembered a truck blocking the curb on my street the previous Saturday. The clerk did not know, but she radioed the carrier. The carrier called me an hour later. "Yeah, I remember," she said. "Some lady with a clipboard was yelling at a contractor. I had to walk around the whole mess to deliver your mail. I asked if she would be willing to write a statement. She said sure. Email me the details." I did. She sent back a 1-paragraph statement confirming the date, time, and what she saw. I added it to the binder. Tuesday evening arrived. I got to the clubhouse at 6:45. Linda was already there, sitting at the head of the table with her clipboard, her portable thermal printer, and a stack of papers. She saw me and smiled. "Glad you could make it." I set my binder on the table. I also set my phone on a small tripod stand and aimed it at the table. "I am recording this meeting," I said. Linda frowned. "That is not allowed." I pulled out a printed copy of the bylaws and pointed to the section on meeting recordings. "Members may record any official meeting," I read aloud. "This is an official hearing." She did not respond. She tapped her clipboard. Terrence walked in at 6:55. Linda looked at him. "This is a private hearing." Terrence sat down next to me. "I am here as an observer and advisor. The bylaws allow members to bring representation." Linda started to argue, but the management company rep, a woman named Diane walked in and cut her off. Let us start. Linda called the hearing to order. She read the complaint. It claimed I had removed survey stakes, damaged HOA landscaping, and begun unpermitted construction in an easement. She said the HOA had photographic evidence. She held up the stack of printed photos with no readable text. I asked to see them. She said no. I asked why. She said the evidence would be presented during her testimony. Linda went first. She described walking the property line on the Friday before Mark arrived. She said the survey stakes were missing. She said there were tire tracks in the HOA common area grass. She said she had placed orange cones to mark the correct setback, and I had ignored them. She said I was building in an easement that the HOA used for drainage maintenance. She held up the photos. I asked again to see them. She said they were being submitted to the record and I could request copies later. Diane, the management rep, looked uncomfortable. Linda, he has a right to review evidence before responding. Linda sighed and slid the stack across the table. I looked at the photos. They showed my back property line. They showed the survey stakes exactly where they were supposed to be. They showed no tire tracks. They showed the orange cones Linda had placed, but the photos were taken from an angle that made it look like the cones marked the true property line when they did not. I pointed this out. Linda, these photos show the stakes are still there. She blinked. What? I held up one photo. Right here. You can see the flagging tape on the stake. She grabbed the photo back. That is a different stake. I pulled out my phone and showed her my photos from Sunday, with the same stakes in the same positions. The survey company confirmed these are the original stakes, I said. I have a written statement from the surveyor. Linda did not respond. She moved to the next point. The easement. She said the HOA had an unrecorded drainage easement along the rear boundary of my property. I asked for documentation. She said it was a historical easement established when the neighborhood was developed. I asked for the plat reference. She said it was in the association's files. I asked Diane if she had a copy. Diane shook her head. I do not have any record of an easement on his property. Linda went red. It is there. I have seen it. I pulled out my title report. I had ordered it the day after Linda blocked Mark. The title company had searched every recorded document on my property. There was no easement. I slid the report across the table. Diane picked it up and read it. She looked at Linda. There is no easement. Linda slapped the table. The association has rights. You do not get an opinion, you get a fine schedule. I let that hang in the air. Terrence wrote something on a notepad and slid it to me. It said, "Let her talk." I nodded. Linda continued. She said I was being obstructive. She said I had a history of non-compliance. I asked what history. She said I had parked a commercial vehicle in my driveway last year. I do not own a commercial vehicle, I said. She said a neighbor reported it. I asked who. She said she could not disclose that. I asked what the vehicle was. She shuffled through her clipboard papers and did not answer. I took a breath. Linda, I have a surveyor statement confirming the property line. I have a title report showing no easement. I have photos showing the survey stakes were never removed. I have the city permit. I have the HOA approval email. I also have a witness statement from the mail carrier who saw you block my contractor at the curb. I opened the binder and pulled out the carrier statement. Linda grabbed it and read it. Her face tightened. This does not prove anything. I said, it proves you blocked a contractor after the HOA had already approved my application. That is harassment. Linda stood up. I do not have to sit here and be accused. Diane spoke up. Linda, sit down. This is a hearing. You need to hear his response. Linda sat, but her hands were shaking. I continued. I also have this. I pulled out the thermal printed violation notice Linda had given me. The notice said construction in progress. Linda, you issued this before Mark unloaded a single post. You issued it before any work began. That is filing a false violation. Terrence leaned forward. It is also grounds for a complaint against you under the bylaws. Diane looked at Linda. Is that true? Did you issue this before construction started? Linda did not answer. She stared at the table. I pressed. You told Mark he had 15 minutes to move his truck or you would call a tow company. You told me I would be fined $500 per day. You placed cones on my property without permission. You claimed an easement that does not exist. You filed a complaint alleging I removed stakes that are still standing. All of this is documented. Linda stood again. This hearing is over. Diane said, no, it is not. Sit down. Linda did not sit. She grabbed her clipboard and her portable thermal printer and walked out. The door slammed behind her. Diane looked at me. I am sorry. She should not have chaired this. I am going to recommend the board reject the complaint and affirm your approval. I asked what happens to Linda. Diane said that was up to the board, but she would include my evidence in her report. Terrence and I walked out. He said, you did good, but she is not going to let this go. I knew he was right. The next morning, I found a new violation notice stuck to my front door. It was printed on the same thermal printer paper. This one said vehicle parked in violation of overnight guest policy. I did not have a guest vehicle. I checked my driveway. My car was there. My work truck was there. No guests. I peeled the notice off and added it to my binder. 2 hours later, I got an email from the HOA management company. It said the board had voted to affirm my fence approval and dismiss Linda's complaint. It also said Linda was being removed as hearing chair pending a review of her conduct. I felt a small win, but I knew Linda was not done. I called Mark. He agreed to come back the following Saturday. I also called a security camera company and had them install a doorbell camera and 2 backyard cameras. I wanted every angle covered. Friday night, I set up the cameras and tested them. Everything worked. I went to bed feeling ready. At 11:15, my phone buzzed. Motion detected on backyard camera. I opened the app. Linda was in my backyard holding a flashlight, walking along the property line where my fence was supposed to go. She was taking photos with her phone. I grabbed my phone and went outside. Linda, what are you doing? She spun around, shining the flashlight in my face. Inspecting. I said, you are trespassing. She said, this is common property. I said, no, it is not. This is my yard. She said, the easement makes it common property. I said, there is no easement. We covered this at the hearing. Linda did not leave. She kept taking photos. I held up my phone. I am recording this. You are trespassing on private property. Linda smiled. Go ahead. I have every right to inspect HOA property. I said, you do not. I am calling the police. She laughed. They will not come for this. I called anyway. The dispatcher said they would send an officer. Linda heard me on the phone and finally walked toward the back gate. She stopped and turned. You are going to regret this. I did not respond. I followed her to the gate and watched her leave. Then I went back inside and saved the camera footage. The police arrived 20 minutes later. I showed the officer the footage. He watched Linda walk through my yard, shine the flashlight, take photos, and refused to leave when asked. He asked if I wanted to file a trespassing report. I said yes. He took my statement and said he would follow up with Linda. He also said if she came back, I should call immediately and request a restraint order if it continued. I thanked him. He left. I checked the cameras again. No motion. I went to bed, but I did not sleep much. Saturday morning, Mark arrived at 8. I met him in the driveway. He unloaded posts, bags of concrete with the labels turned away, string line, a level, and a post hole digger. We started marking the line. Mark pulled string tight between the survey stakes. I held the level. Everything checked. We started digging the first hole. At 8:40, Linda appeared. She walked up the driveway without knocking. I see you ignored the stop work order, she said. There is no stop work order, I said. The board affirmed my approval. Linda held up her clipboard. I issued a new one this morning. She handed me another thermal printed notice. This one said construction halted pending resolution of trespass complaint. Mark stopped digging. I looked at the notice. Linda, you do not have the authority to issue a stop work order. She said, I am the pool and amenities chair. I have enforcement authority. I said, not over private property. She said, the board gave me enforcement authority. I pulled out my phone and called Diane at the management company. I put it on speaker. Diane answered. I explained the situation. Diane said, Linda does not have enforcement authority over private construction. The board affirmed his approval yesterday. Tell her to leave. I held the phone toward Linda. Linda grabbed the clipboard and walked away without saying anything. Mark shook his head. That lady is insane. We kept working. By noon, we had 4 post holes dug and 2 posts set. Mark mixed concrete and poured the first footing. I held the post level while he worked. At 12:30, a car pulled up. A man got out, holding a clipboard. He walked over. Are you the homeowner? I said yes. He said he was from the city inspector's office. Someone called in a complaint about unpermitted construction. I showed him my permit. He looked at it, looked at the posts, and nodded. You are good. Whoever called wasted my time. He left. I knew it was Linda. At 1, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The message said, you are damaging HOA property, and you will be billed for repairs. I screenshotted it and added it to my file. Mark and I kept working. By 3, we had 6 posts in and the string line pulled tight for the remaining holes. Mark said he would come back Monday to finish the posts and start the panels. I thanked him and paid him for the day. He drove off. I walked the line, checking the posts. Everything was square, level, and exactly on the property line. I took photos. Sunday, I got an email from Diane. She said Linda had been removed as pool and amenities chair effective immediately. The board had reviewed the evidence from the hearing and my trespassing complaint and determined Linda had exceeded her authority. Diane also said the board was conducting a management audit to review all enforcement actions Linda had taken over the past year. I felt a small surge of relief. Then I got another email. This one from Linda directly. It was a long, rambling message accusing me of conspiring with Terrence and Diane to undermine her. It claimed I had lied about the survey and fabricated the mail carrier statement. It said I would be hearing from her attorney. I forwarded it to Diane without comment. Monday morning, Mark came back and finished the post holes. By Wednesday, all the posts were in and cured. Mark started hanging panels. I took the day off work to help. Linda did not show up, but I saw her car drive past 3 times. Each time she slowed down and stared. I waved. She did not wave back. By Friday, the fence was done. 6 feet of solid cedar privacy. Perfectly level. Perfectly square. Exactly on the property line. Mark shook my hand. You earned this one. I paid him the balance, and he left. I stood in my backyard and looked at the fence. It felt like a wall between me and the chaos. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Linda's attorney, a solo practitioner in a strip mall office. The letter claimed I had defamed Linda at the hearing and caused her emotional distress. It demanded I issue a public apology and pay $5,000 in damages. I called my own attorney, a woman named Rebecca who handled HOA disputes. She read the letter and laughed. This is nonsense. You stated facts at a hearing. That is not defamation. She said she would respond. A week later, Linda's attorney dropped the demand. Rebecca said he probably realized he had no case. The management audit wrapped up in early March. Diane sent me a summary. The audit found Linda had issued over 40 violations in the past year, most of them improper or unsupported. She had threatened towing on at least 12 occasions without authority. She had used HOA funds to buy her portable thermal printer without board approval. She had placed unauthorized notices on vehicles, doors, and mailboxes. The board voted to revoke her enforcement privileges permanently. They also voted to remove her from the pool and amenities chair position and bar her from holding any HOA leadership role for 5 years. I also filed a small claims case against the HOA for the cost of the attorney consult, the security cameras, and the time I lost dealing with Linda's harassment. I did not ask for much, just enough to cover expenses. The HOA settled before the hearing. They paid my costs and issued a written apology. Diane told me later that the board had considered suing Linda personally to recover the misused funds, but decided it was not worth the fight. Linda resigned from the board entirely in April. The final showdown came at the May board meeting. The meeting was open to all members. I showed up with Terrence. Linda was there too, sitting in the back with her arms crossed. The board president opened the floor for member comments. I stood and presented a timeline of every interaction with Linda, every false violation, every threat, every trespass. I played the video clip of Linda in my backyard at night, refusing to leave when asked. I read the text message threatening to bill me for imaginary damage. I showed the thermal printed notices with false dates. I laid it all out in 5 minutes, clean and undeniable, so the facts were clear even to people who hate drama. When I finished, the room was silent. Then a woman in the third row started clapping. Others joined. Linda stood and tried to speak. The board president cut her off. "Linda, you are not recognized. Sit down." Linda did not sit. She started yelling. "I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes." The room erupted. People laughed. Someone shouted, "That is your defense?" Linda went red. She grabbed her bag and walked out. The president called for order. A board member motioned to formally censure Linda's conduct and add a note to the association records documenting the harassment. The motion passed unanimously. Terrence leaned over. Her stopwatch and ruler routine just got mocked by the room. I nodded. Linda never came back to another meeting. I saw her around the neighborhood occasionally, but she did not speak to me. The fence stood solid and square, exactly where it was supposed to be. I finished the stain in June. The cedar aged into a rich brown that blended with the trees. I planted a row of hedges along the inside for extra privacy. My backyard became a place I actually wanted to spend time in. The HOA hired a new management company in July. The new company reviewed all outstanding violations and rescinded most of them. They also updated the enforcement policies to require board approval for any fine over $100. Diane left to work for another association. I got a thank you card from her in August. She said my case helped push the board to fix a broken system. I appreciated that. Terrence and I stayed in touch. He helped me understand HOA law better than I ever wanted to know it. He also introduced me to a few other homeowners dealing with similar issues. We started a small informal group that met once a month to share advice and laugh about the absurdity of it all. Turns out, vindictive board members are everywhere, and most of them follow the same playbook. The surveyor stake Linda claimed I removed is still standing in the back corner of my yard. I left it there as a reminder. The orange cones she placed disappeared the day after the board meeting. Someone must have picked them up. I did not ask who. My fence has been up for almost a year now. No complaints, no violations, no late-night inspections. The property line is exactly where the survey said it was, and the easement Linda invented never existed. The title report proved it, the audit confirmed it, and the board formally acknowledged it in the meeting minutes. The mail carrier still delivers my mail. I see her sometimes when I am out front. She waves. I wave back. She told me once that Linda tried to file a complaint about her for walking through the truck mess that day. The post office ignored it. Apparently, blocking a mail carrier is a federal issue, and no one wanted to touch it. I laughed when she told me that. It felt like a small piece of cosmic justice. I ran into Linda one last time in October, in the grocery store parking lot. She saw me and looked away. I did not say anything. I got in my car and drove home. The fence was waiting, solid and square, exactly where it was supposed to be. Some battles you win not by fighting harder, but by having better paperwork and refusing to bend when someone tries to scare you with fake authority and invented rules. Linda learned that the hard way. The HOA lost in small claims and paid my costs. Linda was removed as meeting chair and lost the microphone control. A management audit exposed the pattern, and she never recovered her position. Her stopwatch and ruler routine got mocked by the room, and that moment lives in the neighborhood memory now. I went back to work, back to my shifts, back to my normal life. The fence does its job. It keeps my yard private, my dog safe, and my peace intact. That is all I ever wanted. Keep your cool, and I will see you next time.